Appearance on Dion's Daily Dose does not imply endorsement from or by any candidate or guest. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Dion Bergeron or Dion's Daily Dose are his own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any guest. Material and information presented is for general information purposes only. The Dion's Daily Dose name in all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owners, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Dion's Daily Dose presents Face to Face with Dion and Shawn. I'm Dion.
And I'm Shawn.
Welcome, everybody. For those of you who are new to the program, Face to Face is an opportunity for Shawn and I to sit down with you guys and discuss some of what we feel to be the most important things happening right now. And this one is kind of mind-blowing a little bit. They had it's called a resolution, and it's basically just an acknowledgement. It doesn't really do anything like change the law.
No, it's non-binding.
Like yeah, it's a resolution. It says, we believe this. And over the course of this resolution, which is 1213, House Resolution 1213, 2024. It is entitled, what's the actual name of it? Okay, it's a resolution regarding violence against law enforcement. What does that mean? It just means they say you shouldn't attack police officers.
Yeah.
They have a hard job. That's really the crux of it. There's more to it. We'll get into it. But that's really at its base level what they're saying. Shockingly enough, 61 Democrats voted nay on this resolution. Or no. They said, no, we don't believe that. We don't believe that police officers have a hard job. We don't believe it should be wrong to, attack them. Yes, that's true. They said that. They believe that, and we're going to prove it to you. So here we have the U.S. House of Representatives. This is from May 17th of this year. May 17th, 2024. So just a few days ago.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, they had a debate.
Yeah, so they debated this on the House floor, and I think it's rather interesting because this gives you an opportunity to really peek behind the curtain and see what these people believe.
Yep. First, you're going to hear the Democrats' perspective, and then you'll hear the Republicans the second.
We got great timestamps for you. For those of you following along at home, the video is called U.S. House of Representatives. Let me actually see which channel this is. Okay, we got this from Lurkbat, Lurkbat. Thank you, Lurkbat, for posting this. This was one of the few locations we could find it, actually, interestingly enough. So shout out to Lurkbat. I'm going to you see his little watermark up here. I'm going to leave that. We were actually talking about my watermark and putting it up, but I'm intentionally leaving that so that you guys can see where we got it from, because I hate people who steal credit for stuff, man. Why? Just be honest. Anyway, should we read what the resolution says?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, so I'm going to you know what? Let's play this first since this is queued up.
Okay.
And then we'll get to I'll tell you everything that's in the resolution. It's actually not that long for stuff passed on the House floor. It's pretty darn short. It's like a really long single page. Ish. At least the text, the summary of it is pretty short. So here we go. You said first, this is Glenn Ivey speaking, and starting at the 23-minute mark, and it goes 23 to 35:07 is what we're going to listen to / watch, and this should be interesting. You said this is the nay votes perspective.
This is
correct.
Yep, this is the Democrats' perspective.
Okay, all right. Let's oh boy, let's dig in.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Genau.
On August 29th, 2002, two deputy sheriffs in Prince George's County, Elizabeth Magruder and James Arno, were ambushed in the home of the shooter's family. They'd been called to the house to execute a warrant, a health warrant, because the parents were concerned about the erratic behavior of their son. Elizabeth Magruder was shot in the back of the head, and James Arno was shot and killed as well. He left behind a wife, 2 children, and 2 grandchildren. She left behind a husband and a 3-year-old son. I had just been elected state's attorney in Prince George's County, but I hadn't even been sworn in yet. And so one of my first duties was to attend the funerals for both of them. And my first memorial service during Police Week was in their honor. So I take this very seriously. The National Police Week commemoration, I think, is something that is very grave and we should treat with great respect. And unfortunately, the ambush that Magruder and Arno faced that day, those haven't ended. We just saw recently the ambush in Charlotte. 4 officers were killed, 8 were shot. And we've had others like that all over the country. So my thought when we had Police Week approaching was that we would approach this in a bipartisan manner. And I actually reached out and worked with Congressman Hunt from Texas. And we put together a bill that was aimed at expanding the number of police officers because we know that there's shortages across the country. And we know that we need to increase the pipeline so more officers will come and take on these dangerous tasks and stand in harm's way, stand in the gap, as the pastor said this morning. And it was a bipartisan effort, came out of the committee by voice vote, was passed on the floor in a similar capacity. The Senate companion bill is passed as well, and we're looking forward to that becoming the law of the land in short order. Unfortunately, much of the legislation that's come after that has been anything but bipartisan. And the legislation we're speaking to today, I'm afraid, falls in that category. When I took a look at the bill, HRES 1213, I'd hope to see praise go out to our officers across the country for the work that they do, and the officers who've lost their lives in the line of duty.
Yeah.
And indeed, there are paragraphs that speak to that. But unfortunately, there's passages that don't. And my colleague from Virginia, in his comments a few moments ago, made some of the same kinds of comments with respect to, for example, the defund the police argument. Now, somehow, my Republican colleagues have concluded that defund the police, a phrase that was used several years ago, is somehow fueling the rise of crime. And in this particular instance, the death and attacks against police officers.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand the disconnect there to not understand that essentially demonizing the police, it leads to violence. It leads to less respect. Therefore,
and then we got left-wing district attorneys that aren't prosecuting these people.
Right. Ultimately, if there are no consequences, then you can do whatever the hell you want. And if the message that these cretins are pushing is defund the police, aka the police are not, are not our saviors, then it stands to reason that a reduction in respect for police officers would equal additional attacks against police officers. It's really not that difficult to connect. But,
and they're also saying that was several years ago when we wanted to defund the police.
Matter. Yeah, like it's all gone. Like, George
they're still
Washington
trying
said
that.
it.
They're still trying to do it.
They're still saying it.
Yeah.
They're still trying to push it through various agendas. These people kill me, man. They really, really do. Let's go back to it.
But as I just mentioned a moment ago, Magruder and Arno were killed in 2002, over 20 years ago. And we know we've been seeing deaths by officers in the line of duty for decades now. It's nothing new. So to kind of casually blame it on a slogan that I'm not aware of anybody in the body here today that espoused that. Certainly I didn't.
Oh, is he genuinely saying with a straight face that there's no one in the House of Representatives who ever said defund the police?
That's what he's saying. But we both know that that's
both
not
know
true.
That's a lie.
Yeah, that's not true.
Bold-faced lie.
It's election year and they're worried.
That these shootings are occurring.
That's it right there. And I think that's really, really important for people to keep in mind. It's an election year and they're losing.
Mm-hmm.
They are extremely, extremely concerned about getting reelected, and they should be, because the bullshit they have shoveled on the American people for the last two years since these people have been reelected or elected, people have had enough. They've had enough of this crap.
That these killings are occurring is, I think, unfortunate and an abuse of what this week is supposed to mean. Now, in addition, I would say this. I just mentioned that I don't know that anybody supports the defund the police slogan from a few years ago, but we do have colleagues in the House right now, a House Republican, who has a bill, HR 374, to defund ATF. And we have House Republican colleagues who called for the defunding of the FBI. Now, the irony of that, as those of us who have worked in law enforcement know, I was a prosecutor for 12 years, 4 in the federal level, 8 as the locally elected state's attorney. But the local and federal prosecutors work together all of the time. And
I really want people to pay attention to this part, right? Because he's saying no one on my side of the aisle supports defunding the police, right? He said that. Then he said, however, there are a couple of Republicans who have introduced legislation to defund the FBI and defund the ATF. Well, I'm in law enforcement. I was in law enforcement, and we work together frequently with the states. And I want people to pay attention to that, because that's absolutely true. It isn't just the FBI that's corrupt. It isn't just the ATF that exceeds their authority and is thoroughly unconstitutional. These
bureaucrats?
Yeah, but it goes deeper than that. The corruption is in
everything.
Judges, juries, like, it's insane how deep it goes. The trials with President Trump are showing how deep the corruption really goes. So this chode saying, we don't support defund the police, but the Republicans do. Really, guy? Really? Okay, let's listen to this some more.
Critical, and sometimes they work together in task forces because they can bring the local, the state, and the federal forces to bear and provide maximum support in protecting our communities.
Can bring federal and local forces to bear, right? Like they did with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, where they authorized use of deadly force. And that video's coming up. We talk about it. Mm-hmm. But yes, that's exactly the problem. That's exactly the problem. It is okay to say, look, you shouldn't say defund defunding the police and defunding unconstitutional agencies are two very different things. They just are. The FBI is no longer, if it ever was, the shining beacon of justice. Because let's face it, J. Edgar Hoover, oh boy, you want to talk corrupt.
We could do an entire show on that.
And should, yeah, because holy cow. But there are others that have probably done better at showing exactly how frickin' nuts Hoover was.
I think more we should reform the FBI.
That's what I'm saying. But but ultimately saying, look, the FBI in its current form is a runaway agency, and saying that, and then saying the ATF is an unconstitutional agency, which it is, and then saying support your local police or your sheriff's departments, I don't see an issue. There's no conflict there. But
but unfortunately, this piece of legislation and much of the legislation that's been discussed this week, that's been offered by my Republican colleagues, intentionally ignores federal law enforcement. In fact, we had one that was marked up in my committee, Judiciary Committee, where I offered an amendment to include federal law enforcement, and it was expressly rejected on a party line vote by my Republican colleagues.
I'm going to interject here just for a second and say, gee, I wonder why. Look at the weaponization of the federal law enforcement at this point against President Trump.
Yep.
Duh.
And I got to say, you know, FBI, ATF, Border Patrol, they put their lives on the line too. And we should respect them as well. And so one of the reasons I can't support this legislation is that it really is disrespectful to those federal officers. But the other, I guess, is back to the defund the police issue. There's a recognition in the legislation where it talks about the number of officers who've died in the line of duty in 2021, 2022, and 2023. And I can talk about the specific numbers in a moment when we move forward in the debate. But one provision actually notes that 378 law enforcement officers were shot in the line of duty in 2023. And the one common thread between the vast majority of officers who've been killed in the line of duty, like Arno and Magruder, like the people who were ambushed in Charlotte, like most of the people with the names on the wall just a few blocks away from here, is they were shot. Now, sadly.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. I see where this is going.
Yep.
We're going to blame guns.
Yep.
My Republican colleagues are
There it is.
unable, unwilling, unsomething.
It always goes back to
Now
guns.
Take a step to address that gun violence.
Gun violence.
And you know, the resolution here speaks in terms of defunding the police as the cause of their deaths. But all of us know that the greatest threat that these officers face is not being stabbed to death, is not being beaten to death with a slogan like defund the police. It's being shot to death. And I just briefly, 2022, these are numbers from the cops working with the National Fraternal Order of Police. A total of 331 law enforcement officers were shot in the line of duty during calendar year 2022, and 267 separate shooting incidents, including 42 incidents where multiple officers were shot. Now,
I'm just going to pause real quick here. What do you say, 200, 300, 400? Add them all up, less than 1,000, right? The United States civilians hold more firearms than there are people.
Yep.
If gun owners were the problem,
We know it.
you know it. You damn sure know it. And January 6th would look like a birthday party if gun owners were the problem.
Mhm.
If guns were the problem. These freaking people with their rhetoric and their BS, man.
I appreciate the fact that we're going to offer resolutions to praise officers, but if we're really serious about protecting them, it's hard to ignore a data point like that. Yet our officers have to go out there knowing that they face these threats all the time. They go, traffic stops are particularly dangerous, but sometimes in the home, like for Arno and Magruder, they can be ambushed there. Sometimes like in Charlotte, they can be ambushed in the open air. But taking that seriously, I think, is an important piece. Yet the resolution doesn't even mention it. And I'll say this, and then I'll take a pause here for a moment. But you know, there's legislation pending right now in the House of Representatives. I offered one, assault weapons ban. I think, you know, I figure it might be a bridge too far for me to ask my Republican colleagues to co.
Listen, dipshit, they tried that. You anti-gun POSs tried that. It made no difference. The data nerds ran the numbers and came up with it made no difference. It did not do what you said it would do. 10 years or however long it was in
10
effect.
years.
Like 10 years,
From
right?
like 94 to 2004.
Yeah.
You're talking about the
The
assault.
Brady,
Okay, yeah, the assault.
Yeah, the assault weapons ban. These idiots still can't properly define a so-called assault weapon, but that's a whole other story. These dipshits kill me, dude. They really
sponsor that. So I came up
What is going on
with a bill. It's called Raise the Age, and it would elevate
here we go.
the age from 18 to 21 to purchase assault weapons.
Which is
But, go ahead.
which is unconstitutional.
Not only that, right? Not only that. Remember, you can choose your gender
Oh yeah, that's true.
as a baby, but you cannot defend yourself
until you're 21.
As Elon Musk would say, GFY. Refer to the Second Amendment. Shall not be infringed. Hashtag GFY.
And I thought that would be a reasonable bill to offer
That's not
because there
reasonable.
was already a provision in the law for handguns. You had to be 21 to purchase a handgun. And I believe that was put in place during the Reagan era. Now, for my bill, raising it to 21, you got to be 21 to buy alcohol. I thought it might make sense to be 21 to buy an assault weapon as well. And I think we have 170 plus co-sponsors for that bill. But none of them are Republican. Not
Well,
one.
duh.
Thank
Even
God.
Republicans had agreed to legislation similar to that in previous years.
I doubt that.
So
You know what? I'm just going to say this. And my buddy and I talked about it during one of the episodes of Coffee Break. We are done compromising.
Okay.
We are done as Republicans, as people. We are done allowing the Democrats to pass unconstitutional legislation, stripping us of our constitutionally protected, God-given right to bear arms.
I'm with you.
Done.
And that's the problem I have with Mike Braun is that he thinks that he said that we should compromise on guns.
We should really compromise. You should get bent. Don't you have some bent you ought to be getting right about now? Because hell to the no.
I'll speak in a moment about the resources issue as well.
Oh, I
In
can't
the
wait.
117th Congress, Democrats supported legislation to provide equipment to police officers. We'll get into the
Yes, even
particular
less here than I
numbers of that in a moment. But none of that's moving forward here in the House now. And none of it is certainly moving forward in Police Week. But I just want to point out one little factoid, too, from the COPS document that I mentioned before.
Okay.
It's under the heading bullet-resistant vests. At least 34 officers were protected from gunshots that struck a protective ballistic vest. Yet, we're struggling to find a way to provide additional support and equipment for officers to help them stay safe on the street. That's what we ought to be doing during Police Week. And to the extent we're going to talk in terms
That's
of
very broad.
resolutions in support of
How?
What the hell is he talking about? We're struggling to provide equipment. They just said the bulletproof vests that they're being given are working.
Yeah, that was very broad.
The bullet resistant. I'm sorry, bullet resistant. You got to say that. Nothing's even waterproof anymore. You notice that in the 90s, like I had a watch that was waterproof, right? Now everything's water resistant.
officers. Let's strip out the political nonsense.
Yes, let's
The
do
police
that.
Stuff,
Right.
I think, really has no place in helping to protect police officers and make them safe. And as I mentioned a moment ago, it's a slap in the face the way these legislative provisions have been proposed to always exclude federal law enforcement. I know you guys have issues on the other side about some of them, but I think this isn't the time or the place to express it in that way. Federal law enforcement deserves the same kinds of respect, the same kind of appreciation, the same kind of protection that local and state law enforcement officers do.
I bet you.
So let me just real quick, and then so what he's saying, if I'm hearing him correctly, is that if the FBI, ATF, and other unconstitutional agency, hell, throw the CIA in there, they're, constantly, doing positive things. If they were included, he'd vote yes. No, he wouldn't. No,
that was my point exactly. Yeah. I bet you if Republicans
added
the federal police in there, they'd still vote no.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They're just using it as in its use.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to do the resolution, or are you going to go to the Republican side?
We'll go to the. Let's see. We got just under a minute of this guy left. So once again, 23 to 3507 timestamps.
So I'm going to urge my colleagues to oppose not only this resolution, but we've had others that have come through before, and I think we've urged them to oppose those as well. But I'm going to urge my colleagues on the other side after this vote's over, and you're in the majority, so you can move this kind of stuff, whether it really makes a difference or not. But hopefully, after we get past this moment, we can actually sit down and get back to the type of legislation that I worked with Congressman Hunt, that can really make a difference to help make police officers safer, to help get more police officers on the street, and to praise all of them for the great work that they do. And with that, I reserve.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this just for a moment before we move on to the other side. So, according to him, the big holdup, first of all, defund the police isn't happening, you guys. I don't care what you've been told
or what you've seen
with your own two eyes. I don't care what you've heard these people say. Defund the police isn't a thing. It was.
But that was a long time ago.
But that was a long time ago. It's not happening now. And there's no one here who ever said that.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, that is provably false. Provably. I'm sure if I looked right now, I could find multiple videos of multiple of these people.
I think AOC said it.
I know AOC said it.
And Talib
said it.
And I think Omar.
Yeah. I know those three for sure. Probably more.
There's probably more.
Probably more. But according to him,
that never happened.
Don't believe your lying eyes. Believe my Democrat ass. These people. All right. So next we have Pete Stauber. Now this is kind of long. All right, so
it's a long speech, but it's pretty good.
Is it? Okay, so he's
pretty passionate.
All right. Stauber.
It's like 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, it's 4101 to 10109, so 20 minutes. So let's hear what he has to say, because that's what this is about. And then we'll actually read. Unless you want to read the bill.
Sure. Let's see what he was complaining about.
Yeah, let's actually look at the bill real quick, so that I can show you guys what they are complaining about. Let's see here. All right. So here it is right here. Ba-boop. All right. So it's fairly short. It's House Resolution 1213. Or 1213. Make sure you put it in 2024, because it changes every couple of years. A resolution regarding violence against law enforcement officers.
And they wrote it in a way that you could put federal with there. It's like all law enforcement, they're saying.
Law enforcement.
Yeah, they don't say just local or state.
Right.
They said.
But let's see. Let's get into it and see exactly what it says here. Zoom this in for you. This is not the latest text. Hold on. We need to read the latest text. Here it is. Okay. Same thing. A resolution regarding violence against law enforcement officers. Resolution. Whereas, beginning in 2020 and in conjunction with the Defund the Police movement, respect for the rule of law and law enforcement officials diminished. That's provable.
Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely provable, because in 2020, I remember it was this massive shift from thank our heroes in law enforcement to defund the police. They're all criminals.
After what happened with George Floyd.
George Floyd, right? Which obviously we know what really happened now. Whereas this change in attitude has resulted in record death and injury to America's law enforcement officers at the federal, state, local, and tribal level.
So they did mention the federal.
They did mention federal.
He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Imagine that. A Democrat who talks out of his ass. No way, dude. No way. Whereas policies implemented at several state and local jurisdictions have increased the difficulty and added significant risks for law enforcement to do their jobs effectively and safely. And I think you're talking about like Minneapolis got rid of their entire police force, conveniently replaced with private security for the politicians. Whereas law enforcement is demanded to handle societal problems, including a nationwide mental health crisis, record-setting overdose poisonings due to fentanyl, and an increase in the homeless population. All true. Whereas the lack of accountability for violent criminals with decreased penalties and no bail policies has opened the door for record criminal activity in cities across the country.
Everything on this is true.
True. Whereas these policies have encouraged the public to aggressively and violently engage with law enforcement. New York is a prime example.
We covered that on the show.
Yep. Whereas law enforcement officers answer every service call, regardless of community support or ridicule. Also true. Whereas law enforcement officers answer every service call, regardless of the threat to their lives. That's true. Whereas there are currently 23,785 names of law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty inscribed on the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. 23,785. Whereas the deadliest year on record for law enforcement was 2021, when 586 law enforcement officers were killed in the line of duty. 586 officers killed in the line of duty in 2021. That is shocking. I knew it was high. I just didn't realize it was that high. Whereas in 2022, 224 law enforcement officers were killed in the line of duty. In 2023, 137 law enforcement officers were killed in the line of duty. Interestingly enough, 2020 was the whole defund the police crap.
Yep.
2021, 586, right? 2022, 224, 2023, 137. It's almost like the farther away we get from that big defund the police bullshit, the less law enforcement officers are being killed. Because you don't really hear that much anymore, do you? As a matter of fact, this guy's trying to say it didn't even happen.
Uh-huh. Makes you wonder, because so many places are shorthanded, maybe that could be.
Could be. Whereas 378 law enforcement officers were shot in the line of duty in 2023, the highest year on record, of which 115 were violent ambush attacks.
Wow.
Whereas the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund anticipates adding at least 151 names to the sacred walls in the spring of 2024, representing the current and historical deaths, which to date have been approved as line of duty deaths. It genuinely makes me sick, dude.
Yeah, we should respect our officers.
And look, I'm going to be very, very clear on this because my belief has changed a little bit. I used to bleed blue, dude. I used to be law enforcement. I worked at Indiana State Prison. Yeah, it's the redheaded stepchild of law enforcement, but it's still law enforcement. And some of my really good friends that I worked with went on to become police officers. My uncle was a town sheriff. Like, it runs in my family, right?
I did not know that.
Yeah. But anyway, I have multiple family members who served or currently serve in law enforcement. There are bad officers there.
But the strong majority are good people.
The vast majority are good people.
And you get bad apples in anything that you do.
One thing I will say that I think probably is responsible for the vast majority of the issues with law enforcement: training. We have FBI and various other paid to train agencies that come and teach our law enforcement how to act. I think there's a problem with that training. I genuinely do. And I would like to see that reformed, because I believe it should be a lot more focused on our Constitution and respecting it. But the vast majority of officers are trying to do their job. They're just doing the best they can.
And don't jump the gun like when something happens right away. We should hear the story. But if they did do something wrong, they should be punished.
They absolutely should be punished. If someone violates your rights, they should be held to task. Let's see here. Whereas the average fallen law enforcement officer is 45 years old, whereas the average fallen law enforcement officer has 15 years of service, whereas the average fallen law enforcement officer leaves behind 2 children, and whereas current data does not show how many law enforcement officers are assaulted, injured, or disabled in the line of duty each year. Now, therefore, be it. Okay, so they've established all of this, and I agree that all of that stuff is accurate. So they say these are the facts, right? Because that's what the whereas is all about. Whereas this, and then they get to the resolution part coming up where they say, okay, we're going to declare this or do this. That the House of Representatives, 1, condemns calls to defund the police, which has increased violence towards law enforcement officers. 2, recognizes that law enforcement officers must have the equipment, training, and resources necessary to protect the health and safety of the public, as well as their fellow law enforcement officers on the job. I agree with that. 3, recognizes the need for better data collection on law enforcement officers who are assaulted, injured, or disabled in the line of duty. I think that's reasonable. 4, acknowledges its responsibility for exemplifying a respect for the rule of law and for the law enforcement officers who protect communities across the nation. Okay. 5, acknowledges the mental stress and strain law enforcement officers suffer, not only due to the pressures and realities of the job, but also the negative environment in which they often must work. And that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, we see these officers, and like, for example, right? Wife got a speeding ticket a couple of years ago, right? Cop came up, right? Slow down, here's the ticket. We have no idea where this person came from. The officer could have just come from an infant mortality or a bad car wreck.
True.
They see people generally on the worst day of their lives. Does that excuse bad behavior and violating your rights? Of course not. No. What I does say is a lot of times the stress is really, really high. Really high. Police officers, correctional officers, stuff like that are jobs like that. The suicide rate is astronomical. Astronomical. 6, acknowledges the need to strengthen its relationship with law enforcement to ensure policy decisions are aligned with the realities law enforcement officers face daily. And 7, expresses condolences and solemn appreciation to the loved ones of each law enforcement officer who has made the ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And there are 61 Democrats that voted against this. It's not even binding.
No.
It's not like they're saying, we all have to do this, salute, or you know what I mean? Like it's procedural. It's to show, look, we respect you, we care about you, We think the defund the police like slogan itself and the actions it resulted in were unfortunate. We say don't do that anymore. No, because you know where their loyalties lie.
And they didn't even have to vote against it. They could have voted present.
Right. And that's another thing that's very, very interesting. So rather than vote nay, they could have just abstained. They could have just said, you know what, it's not perfect, but I'm not voting against it.
And they made sure to vote against it.
They made sure to vote nay. All right, let's get to the Republican.
Okay, if you want to cut it, you can.
Well, let me ask, what do you think? You think
that's up to? I think it's good.
Okay,
but
let's show it.
I don't know if it's getting too long or.
Yeah, I mean, let's see here. There we go.
And then you'll show the roll call vote.
Then we're going to show you the roll call vote. I was able to find it. It's very, very difficult to find.
It is.
Shawn, who does this all the time, was unable to locate it right away. It took a few minutes of finding before he was able to.
I don't like how they set up the roll call vote now.
It's weird. But let's get to this. This is good.
Officer and Mr. Stubber.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm frustrated and angry, but also deeply saddened. The law enforcement profession is an honorable one. To have so much compassion for others that you are willing to put your life on the line. It is, as we say, a call to service, and not many hear that call today.
True.
If you had asked me a few years ago if my children should become law enforcement officers, I would have undoubtedly said yes.
Yeah.
But after these last few years,
right,
observing the treatment of our law enforcement officers.
I'm going to pause it here real quick because my oldest son wanted to be a police officer since he was a kid. Like, I mean, that's what he dressed up for as Halloween. He would jump for joy every time he saw a police officer. He'd go up to him and shake their hand. He'd say, "Thank you for your service." 2020 happened. And he's like, I don't think I want to be a cop anymore.
I don't blame him.
I mean, what?
I would have to think
That's
twice.
probably why there's a shortage.
My answer. Since 2020, I have watched the law enforcement profession become a punching bag, scapegoated by rabid media pundits more interested in clickbait than the facts.
Yes.
Villainized by Hollywood and disparaged by city councils, members of this Congress, both men and women, and even our president.
Yeah.
Yet all these people expect law enforcement to respond to the calls for service. They expect them to take the verbal assault and show up with a smile on their face, ready to serve. The wonderful thing about my brothers and sisters in uniform is that despite this treatment and abuse, they will show up. They will answer every call. They will sacrifice their safety for others. They will help protect their community no matter how much ridicule or resentment they face. But I am here to say the things that they can't. I'm here to protect my brothers and sisters in the blue and brown because others won't. Enough is enough. Law enforcement officers deserve our respect, our admiration, and our support. To provide anything less is unacceptable. The resolution before us acknowledges the change in attitude towards law enforcement over the last few years and the subsequent violence directed toward them.
Yeah.
Yep.
It acknowledges that they respond to the calls for service no matter who is on the other line. It acknowledges that the job has only become more dangerous and more mentally and physically exhausting. Yet they still show up for work, not knowing if they've kissed their families goodbye for the last time. Importantly, this resolution also acknowledges that we in this chamber set the standard. We are the ones who must demonstrate a respect for the rule of law and a respect for our law enforcement officers if we are to expect the public to do the same.
Yeah.
We must do so in our actions, in our conversations, and even the policies we consider. Bills that never become law can have the most staggering ripple effect. They can persuade local municipalities to implement
I believe this
soft
guy's
crime
from Minnesota.
policies and strip law enforcement of resources. They can encourage the public to cheat, steal, and disrespect fellow community members.
Mm-hmm.
They can cause good, noble people to change their minds about entering the profession that I love so much, which is law enforcement.
And have.
Actions have consequences, and our communities are suffering as a result. But let's take this moment to learn to change for the better. We can rise to the moment, stand with our law enforcement officers, reestablish law and order, and bring safety back to our communities. I encourage all of my colleagues to vote on this resolution. Mr. Chair, I want to take a few minutes to respond to my good friend and colleague who's managing the time on the other side of the aisle.
Who we heard
Talked
earlier.
about his support for law enforcement, what he did. I want to read something to you. Quote, "It is not enough to hold the officers involved accountable. In the past year, police killings have reached a record high. Rogue, militant policing continues to run rampant across our country, threatening public safety and the lives of millions of Americans. Our antiquated criminal justice system has long allowed law enforcement to utilize excessive force and prejudicial policing practices while avoiding accountability. We need extensive reform now with de-escalation training, selective bias training, and better policing. I am urging my..."
And remember, he said that they needed more equipment, and now
Right.
he's complaining.
Right.
I mean, he's making that quote.
Yep.
That's
And bear in mind that these people, the guy who was talking before him,
Yep.
these people want to ban firearms.
Yep.
They want to raise the age. They want to ban certain types of firearms. They hate the police, but yet believe the police should be the only ones armed. It makes no sense.
It doesn't.
It is illogical because everything they say is based on emotion. Vote harder, people. Vote harder.
Colleagues in Congress to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Additionally, we must invest in our communities through unarmed first responder agencies, mental health and crisis support treatment options, diversion programs, community intervention groups, and reentry programs. We can and must do better to avoid tragedies and improve public safety.
I will say this. I was real quick. There are psychologists available to police departments already here. They don't go out on calls with them because you have no freaking idea what you're walking into.
Yeah.
You have a domestic violence situations are probably one of the most dangerous situations that law enforcement officers can go to. Yeah, traffic stops are way up there, but DV situations, when you go there, oftentimes they're both against you. Even though, like, for example, not that it's exclusive to a male attacking a female, because it's not, but I'm here to tell you it happens the other way as well. But male attacking female, officer goes to arrest male, female jumps on officer's back or attacks officer. It happens way more than you think.
I will never stop working to support and enact changes that will make our country safer for all Americans. The first part, this whole quote that I read was from my colleague who's managing time on the other side of the aisle.
Right.
That's horrendous because the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act takes away qualified immunity. You take away qualified immunity from the American law enforcement officer, it will devastate our communities. It will devastate recruitment, retention, morale.
I'm going to interject here real quick because there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the qualified immunity.
All right.
Right. And I was a correctional officer. Correctional officers do not have qualified immunity. The inmates would constantly sue officers over nothing. Like, they tie you up in court, and the reason that police officers have qualified immunity immunity is not so they can be protected from constitutional rights violations, because if they violate your rights, they can be held accountable. It's for civil lawsuits, frivolous civil lawsuits that tie up valuable time. If you have to go to court every other day to defend yourself from spurious, untrue allegations, it's kind of hard to be an effective peace officer.
I did not know that.
Now, are there issues with the way qualified immunity currently is? Sure. But taking away qualified immunity in its entirety, number one, will result in a massive backlog of court cases. I'm here to tell you, because one of the things we've learned when we started at ISP was be prepared to be sued. You will get sued. As long as you didn't break the rules, the state will defend you.
Do you know if there's like a reform that we could do? Because there was a push in Congress to reform qualified immunity.
So that's the whole thing with Braun, right? He had tried to lead the charge to reform it. But he was told by the officers, any changes to it may backfire, right? Is there a way to do so? I'm sure there is. Much smarter people than me could figure it out, I'm sure. It's definitely something worth discussing.
Yeah.
I think these are the kind of things that need real discussion on the House floor. How do we fix this? Because there's room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. Nothing and no one is perfect. But in its current form, you just yeet it away. Oh boy, you're opening a massive can of worms.
You have to be kidding me. Mr. Chair, this is what we're dealing with. I became a law enforcement officer in late '94. When Ron Ryan and Tim Jones from the St. Paul Police Department were ambushed and killed. I was a young officer. I didn't even have my funeral uniform yet. But I went to those funerals, wondering what profession I was getting in. Even taking a second thought whether I should stay in this profession. 1 week on the job. In Cottage Grove, Minnesota, I was working the night shift. Myself and my partner at night, Tom Hewlin, stopped at a gas station, have a cup of coffee, midnight shift. Talk about our families. We split up. He went one way, I went the other. Within 3 minutes, he's screaming for help. He needs help on a traffic stop. I couldn't get there fast enough. When my squad car got on that scene, the whole engine was shaking. I couldn't get to him fast enough. He was being attacked by the driver, the dog, and the female passenger was crying. We find out when Officer Hewlin went to make that traffic stop, the driver said to the female passenger, "I'm going to kill him." When Officer Hewlin went up to the window, the suspect was digging in his armrest, trying to get a handgun. And the female passenger was trying to move it away from him to save the officer's life. I got there during the struggle. And I looked 5 minutes before that. He and I were having a cup of coffee talking about our families and our futures. That's how quick it can change. And the cavalier attitude of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle is unconscionable. Where were they during the Summer of Love 2020 when officers were getting ambushed?
Yeah.
Where were they, Mr. Speaker? On December 15th of 1995 at 10:32 p.m. at the intersection of 6th Avenue East and 4th Street in Duluth, Minnesota, a career criminal tried to shoot me in the head and kill me, and I survived by the grace of God.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
A career criminal that should have been put away years ago. Don't tell me we don't have issues. We have issues with prosecution too.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
The federal prosecutor in Minneapolis would not charge him with felon in the possession of a handgun. We couldn't figure out why. off-duty police officer shot in the head by a career criminal that should never have had the gun, wouldn't prosecute. But it was about 8 years later when the drug task force supervisor woke me up in the middle of the night, called me and said, Pete, we got him. He's going to prison for a long time. We've got the stolen guns on him. He's not getting away with this one. It took him years after to put this guy away. Then on a London Road in Duluth, Minnesota, suspects tried to kidnap some folks. I get the call with my supervisors, and I don't get to choose what call I go on. I don't get to say, I don't want to go on this gun call.
That's true.
I don't want to go on that. I get the call and we go. And every single police officer in this nation does the same thing. Kidnapping, suspect with a gun. I go clear the room, Mr. Chair, and the suspect comes flying in the room, points a handgun right at me, pulls the trigger. And by the grace of God, it didn't go off. And you know why I knew it didn't go off? It happened so fast. I saw it in his eyes. I was in a street fight for my life. And yes, I needed some help after that call. And that's why I'm adamant that the professionals that serve our communities get the mental health they need, and they need it now sometimes. So to listen to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle pretend they support law enforcement, they've never worn the boots, or many of them never worn the boots. They've never answered a call. Two shot, officer needs help. They've never, most of them have never had a suspect with a rifle in his hand ready to kill you. And I have to make a decision, Mr. Chair. If that rifle comes up, I have to save my life. I have to do that. I don't want to, but his actions are causing me to save my own life and the life of others. Mr. Chair, the honorable men and women in law enforcement in America deserve better treatment. This week we celebrated Law Enforcement Week, Police Week. We saw the men and women in uniform, the proud men and women in uniform, come to our nation's capital and be proud of their profession. This week, Law Enforcement Week, should be 52 weeks a year.
Yep.
Every week we should support law enforcement and protect law enforcement. I am sick and tired of seeing this happen to law enforcement men and women, Mr. Chair, throughout this nation.
Yeah, I agree.
There's members in this body that stand in a microphone and vilify law enforcement.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They'll go to their funerals, though.
Yeah.
Yep.
They'll go to their funerals.
Yep.
When it comes to supporting a legislation that I have here, a resolution regarding violence against law enforcement. My colleague says it's partisan. You have to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Right.
A resolution regarding violence against law enforcement officers. And my good friend calls it partisan.
Partisan.
And yes, defund the police was real. We're
Oh,
seeing the
yeah.
effects of
It
it
was.
today.
Yep.
The recruitment, retention, morale are at the lowest ever.
Yep.
Shortages, Mr. Chair, in police departments across this nation, including my hometown.
Yes.
They want to sit up here in Police Week and pretend, we're not going to have it. You either support law enforcement or you don't.
Yep.
And you know what, Mr. Chair? We need to, most departments today wear body cameras or have squad car cameras in squad cameras.
Yeah.
We as a nation Cooler heads must prevail on the support for law enforcement. We have to understand what they go through.
Mhm.
We must push, comply now, challenge later.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Comply now,
Hold on.
challenge later.
You are never going to legislate your way on the side of the road
That's true.
out of a situation.
That's
right?
true.
The officer, whatever reason, once they decide to arrest you, you can say whatever you want. You can talk. But when you start physically resisting, when you start going, no, unfortunately, that's not the time. The easier and better you make it, do what they say. It sucks, especially if you know you're right and you know they're wrong. It sucks. I've been there. Just do it, because eventually, if you are as right as you think you are, it'll get tossed and you might even get a little money.
True.
Just saying. But you're not going to solve anything by fighting with the officer on the side of the road.
I agree.
That you're just not. I do recommend don't say anything without a lawyer, especially once it gets to that point.
Uh-huh.
But that's
You
just
sure
my
you have the
advice.
right
I'm
to
not
remain
I'm
silent.
not an attorney. I'm not offering legal advice, but just what I would do is STFU.
Mr. Chair, in 23 years of law enforcement, when I place somebody under arrest, please put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest, palms out. Don't resist, you understand. And I placed my handcuffs on them, gapped them, double locked them, escorted to the right rear seat of my squad car. When they obeyed my lawful order, Mr. Chair, I didn't get hurt.
True.
Right.
The suspects didn't get hurt.
Right.
The public didn't get hurt. When a law enforcement gives you a lawful order, obey her.
And if you believe it is not a lawful order, just do it. Go along with it. Again, nowadays there's body cams, there's everything else.
That's true.
You can challenge it later, but it's not worth potentially putting yourself and the public at risk resisting.
Obey a lawful order. When a law enforcement officer says, put your hands on the steering wheel, put your hands on the steering wheel. When a law enforcement officer says, sit on the sidewalk for safety purposes, sit on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
When a law enforcement officer says, you are under arrest for domestic assault, obey a lawful order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Where did society, where did we want to be judge, juror, executioner on the streets of the United States of America?
Yeah.
It's wrong.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, we have to change, and it's up to leadership in our nation's capital and elected leaders at all levels in every state.
Yeah.
To the men and women who wear the uniform in this great nation, I will tell you, it's a noble, honorable profession.
It is.
And no matter what you hear
4 minutes left.
from some folks that you're not wanted, it's unwarranted, it's not a good career, I will tell you, I spent 23 years as a police officer in the city of Duluth, Minnesota. I helped build a community policing program. I love the profession, and I enjoyed the profession. Yes, Mr. Chair, the darkest hours of someone's life we deal with, and we deal with compassion and professionalism. It's not easy, but we need the good men and women. And Mr. Chair, we also need people that perform violent acts against innocent citizens. We need to hold them accountable. We need prosecutors to hold them accountable
Exactly.
when they
Exactly.
perform a violent crime. And I will tell you, in closing, Mr. Chair, we in this country, we better reshape our thinking and our focus towards safety of all of us. And we do that by supporting the men and women in uniform. And we do that by electing leaders at all levels of government that support law enforcement. We in law enforcement want to be held accountable, okay?
Yeah.
But let me tell you something. Right now, we have a rogue attorney general in Hennepin County, Minnesota, that is bringing murder charges against Minnesota trooper Ryan Londrigan for what he did to save his partner's life.
Wow.
And the use of force expert opined to that the trooper Londrigan used lawful force to save his partner's life. He's now being charged in Hennepin County by an anti-law enforcement attorney general. In fact, she can't even find an attorney in her own department, Mr. Chair, to prosecute the case. She's spending over $1 million of taxpayer money, Mr. Chair, to come to this town and find a prosecutor.
Wait, hold on.
Uh-huh.
So they couldn't find someone to prosecute it because they said this is bullshit.
In Minnesota.
So they went to D.C.
Yep.
to get a prosecutor who would try the case.
Yep.
It's unbelievable.
That is unbelievable. That is
People
insane.
in Minnesota and Hennepin County should understand what's happening to that good man, that good trooper and his family. I will stand up to the good men in law enforcement no matter what I have to do. No matter what I have to do. Mr. Chair, I will say this. If we don't have a change of attitude towards law enforcement, this country is going to be in trouble. And before I close, I want to ask, this is an ask to the American people, every American. The next time you see a law enforcement officer, I want you to look her in her eye and you tell her, thank you for your service. We appreciate you.
And I do.
I do.
She will
Absolutely.
take that response and carry it with her the rest of the day, rest of her shift, and forever. We need to show appreciation. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
All right. Do you want to see the roll call?
Yeah. Rather than play the whole roll call for you, we're just going to show you. We're going to show you how these people voted. We were able to find it, thankfully. So let me get brought up here. And so before we get to this real quick, I do want to say they do appreciate it when you thank them, and you don't even have to do that. If you're just like, hey, how you doing? Good to see you.
Just acknowledging
Just
them.
acknowledge that they're out there and that they're people, right? That they're just people. Same thing with correctional officers. We're just people trying to do a job. Some of us, the vast majority of us, believe in the job that we're doing. There are a few that don't. But unfortunately, that tiny minority is what gets plastered all over the news. Because there's nothing interesting about people doing their job regular day to day, let's face it. All right, so look, 85% or 337 voted yay on this resolution. Just a resolution thanking law enforcement and saying, hey, defund the police probably wasn't a great thing for you guys. And 134 Democrats voted yay. However, 61 Democrats voted nay on this.
And Frank Morvan voted Yes, I
Yeah.
believe.
Let's point that out because I always give credit.
Our
Morgan
congressman-
actually voted yay on this, so props to him. But we'll dig into it. Now, interestingly enough, there were 32 that did not vote. 18 Democrats, 14 Republicans. Now, how many weren't there?
That's what I'm wondering.
It's possible. I don't know. But it's something we could learn. Not tonight. Let's get to this. All right. So look, I organized it down here by nay votes. If you guys want to check this, it's govtrack.us. And then you go to Congress votes, and then it's 118/2024 H218. You can find it if you put 1213. But all the Democrats, first of all, look at that. Amazing. Why am I not surprised? Andre Carson from Indiana voted nay.
Wow.
Andre Carson, shame on you. Let's see here. We're just going to run down through them. Balint, Berrigan, Blumenauer, Bonamici, look, Jamal Bowman. Imagine that. Corey Bush. Imagine that. Andre Carson, Gregorio Cesar, Sean Caston, Catherine Clark, Yvette Clark, Jasmine Crockett. Imagine that. Tony Cardenas, Diana DeGette, Lloyd Doggett, Anna Ishu, Bill Foster, Valerie Fushi, Maxwell Frost, John Garamendi, Robert Julio Garcia, Sylvia Garcia, Troy Garcia, Dan Goldman, Jimmy Gomez, Al Green, Jared Huffman, Glenn Ivey, Jonathan Jackson, Pramila Jayapal. Look at that. Big shock. Hank Johnson, Sidney Kamliger Dove, Barbara Lee, Summer Lee, Jennifer McClellan, Morgan McGarvey, Jim McGovern, Gwen Moore, Gerald Nadler. Oh, look. Grace Napolitan. How do you say that? Napolitano?
Yeah, Napolitano, I think.
Napolitano. Grace Napolitano. Look at that. Richard Neal. AOC. Big damn shock. Ilhan Omar. Look at that. Shelley. Now, what's really funny is the Democrat up there talking swears that defund the police isn't a thing.
Uh-huh.
Look at all these. The very people who said
We need to defund
we
the
need to
police.
defund the police. Kelly Pingree, Mark Pocan, Katie Porter, Ayanna Presley, another name we're familiar with. Delia Ramirez, John Sarbanes, Mary Scanlon, Jan Schakowsky.
From Illinois.
Yeah, Illinois. I see a lot of Illinois, dude. Bobby Scott, David Scott, Melanie Stansberry, Mark Takon, a whole lot of California too, unsurprising. Rashida Tlaib, Lauren Underwood, another Illinois. Nydia Velasquez, Maxine Waters, yay, Bonnie Watson Coleman, and Nakima Williams. And then we got our no votes. Let's see here. I'm just looking. We got Illinois, Danny Davis, New Jersey. What's up?
Here are the Republicans. Let's do.
I'm going to check in just a second. I'm looking at, okay, Michigan, no vote. All right. So, yeah, do you want to hear the Republicans who didn't vote?
Yeah.
All right. So we got Vern Buchanan, Michael Cloud, Scott DeJarle, Drew Ferguson, Carlos Jimenez, Kay Granger, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
That's interesting.
That is interesting. That is very interesting.
Uh-huh.
I would be interested to know if she was absent.
That's a good possibility.
Yeah. Because it does happen.
It does.
Look, if they're constantly absent, that's a problem. But there are things that come up in their district that prevent them from being in session from time to time.
Or they could be sick.
Yeah, or they could be sick. Thomas Keene, David Kustoff, Darren LaHood from Illinois, Lisa McClain from Michigan, Patrick McHenry, North Carolina, Marionette Miller Meeks from Iowa, and Alexander Mooney from West Virginia. Everyone else voted yay.
That's interesting.
Yes. The several hundred others, both Dems and Republicans, voted yay on this bill because really, like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Genuinely.
There's
Yeah. So again, to remind, Frank Mervan from Indiana's 1st District voted yay. But I want to say this. It's coming up to election time. And Mervan might be in trouble.
we'll see.
We'll see. I do want to say this. Niemeyer, right? I believe they're genuinely worried about him. They came out and called him, quote, a truck, just a trucker.
Yeah, we were talking about
Just
that
a
earlier.
truck driver. Ladies and gentlemen, do you not remember that truck drivers were heroes not that long ago by the media, right? Now he's just a truck driver. He's not just a freaking truck driver. He owns the business.
Yeah.
He happens to choose to go out and continue to work to help his employees. Sounds
is
like a
good.
pretty damn good business owner to me, just personally. I have my disagreements with policies with him, but as far as being a person, I mean, I was just a trucker. I guess that's, a bad thing nowadays.
No, we need truck drivers.
Exactly. It's nuts, man. But
It is.
that's what we have. The Hall of Shame, all the nay votes, and some very unsurprising. I mean, let's face it. I never expected some of these people to vote yay for anything pro law enforcement at all. On the other hand, a few of them are like, really? So we try to keep you up to date on all of the interesting information. We have a whole lot of videos. If you haven't seen, check us out. We're streaming on YouTube, X, Rumble, Facebook, and Twitch for videos. And then for audio-only versions, podcast, the list is quite large. We are, here we go, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Apple and Samsung Podcast, Deezer, which that name cracks me up. I have to resist every time I list it to not make a joke. It's hard, giggity. I can't not do it. Anyway, so look, we're out there.
Check us out.
Yeah, check us out. We have a whole lot more shows out there, and you're bound to find something that you're interested in. We do face-to-face most nights at 7 p.m. Some are pre-recorded because he can't be here every night at 7. So we record the videos in advance, play them 7 p.m. most evenings, and then you can always go back and watch, pre-recorded as always. And then on Wednesday mornings, we have coffee break with my buddy Jim, and we talk about a little more esoteric stuff, survival, motorcycles, firearms, and lots of interesting stuff. Today's episode this morning was about the commercialization of the prepper community and vault tech in the real world, and basically how these companies are building vaults and selling them to people. There's a place here in Indiana. Very, very interesting. Anyway, check it out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate your time. And as always, God bless you, God bless Indiana, and God bless the United States of America, even with these dipshits in charge. Have a good night.